Hi everyone, my name is Christine Mendoza. I'm from Texas, so we just got our power on yesterday. It's been pretty crazy. Still trying to catch up on everything. My topic today is, should law enforcement be permitted to use facial recognition technology? I'm going to argue that they should not, and this is going to be based on the technology's limitations and the potential for abuse. So, first of all, let's start with what is facial recognition. So, this is a system capable of identifying a person from a digital image, video frame, or video source. The technology takes an image and detects the location of the eyes, and then that image is converted to grayscale and cropped. Then the grayscale cropped image is used to search databases with complex algorithms comparing the template to other templates on file. The algorithms analyze specific distinctive details about a person's face, such as the relative position, size, and shape of their eyes, nose, cheekbones, and jaw, or anything else like this. And then that is converted into a mathematical representation and compared to data on other faces collected in the facial recognition databases. A little history on how it came to be, and also how it started getting, given to the law enforcement agencies to begin with. So the inception of facial recognition technology was by Woodrow Wilson Bledsoe. In 1960, he developed a system that could classify photos of faces by hand using a RAND tablet. And I hope I'm saying that right. I'm not sure if it's RAND or a RAND tablet. I'm going to call it a RAND tablet. So a RAND tablet was a device that took vertical and horizontal coordinates on a grid as input using a stylus that emitted electromagnetic pulses. This was used to manually record and coordinate locations of the facial features, such as like the eyes, the hairline, nose, mouth. It was able to see how far apart everything was mathematically. And then these values were put into a database, and the system could pull an image from the database that most resembled the profile. In the 1970s, Bledsoe's system was built upon by Harman, Lesk, and Goldstein by adding 21 specific facial markers to identify faces automatically. These markers included things like lip thickness and hair color, so it's getting a little more advanced, and this improved the accuracy. But since the measurements and locations needed to be manually computed, still the program was still extremely labor intensive. And then in 1988, Surovich and Kirby took Bledsoe's idea and applied linear algebra to further improve the accuracy. This worked by searching for low dimension representation of faces, of face images, and showed that the principal component analysis could be used on a collection of face images to form a set of basis features. And then these base images, called engine pictures, and I hope I'm saying that right too, could be linearly combined to reconstruct images in the original set. This method became known as the engine face approach. In 1991, Turk and Penland expanded on this approach by discovering how to detect faces within images. So kind of like when you get hey, click on all the crosswalks in this image, and you're supposed to be able to detect it, but the computer can't. That's kind of the same idea. And this was the first instance of automatic face recognition. In the 1990s, the Face Recognition Technology Program, or the FERET, sponsored by the Department of Defense, was deployed with the goal of developing automatic facial recognition capabilities that could be used to assist security, intelligence, and law enforcement. The three major components of the FERET were, firstly, sponsoring research, which the main objective was obviously to develop the recognition algorithms. And then secondly, it was to collect the FERET database, where obviously it was trying to collect enough images for accurate evaluations. And then lastly, performing the FERET evaluations, which is where the evaluations were performed to measure the progress of the algorithm development. And then in the early 2000s, building off of the FERET system, the National Institute of Standards and Technology began facial recognition vendor tests, and this kind of opened it up for commercial use. And then in 2010, Facebook began using facial recognition technology. And this was the first time that I, at least knowingly, came into contact with it, or I became aware of this technology. And this gave users the ability to automatically be tagged or offer tag suggestions in uploaded photos. But there were a lot of accuracy issues, and that led to big companies to start to invest in the development. In 2014, Facebook developed DeepFace, which is based on machine learning, a machine learning sub-branch called deep learning. It uses a 9-layer neural net with over 120 million connection weights. It was developed by using 4 million images uploaded by Facebook users, without consent, by the way. There was a lot of controversy over this, and there was actually a lot of controversy starting to come up from this information being given to law enforcement from the FERET and everything else that was going on. And in light of this, in 2015, Facebook was actually sued by a group of users in Illinois. They argued that the facial recognition technology was a violation, of the state's privacy laws. The state has laws that do not allow biometric data to be collected without consent. And since Facebook was automatically opting all of their users in, they ended up having to settle for $550 million. And I think if they actually paid what the state said they were supposed to pay, they would have had to pay like $1,000 to each individual. And they settled for $150 per person for a grand total of $550 million. It's a lot of money. It's crazy. Let's see. I put a link below if you want to check that out too. And today we're seeing facial recognition technology being used in pretty much all social media, major apps, and even commercial use. Apple's even started using this as a security measure to unlock your phone. Law enforcement agencies are using facial recognition more frequently in routine policing. As of 2015, at least 39 states used facial recognition software with the DMV databases to detect fraud. Your driver's license picture and other ID photos are often shared with law enforcement and other agencies like ICE, and then those agencies use the facial recognition software to compare your face with those in mugshots and other photos of people suspected of committing crimes. Law enforcement agencies across the U.S. have also started using new third-party facial recognition systems, most prominently from Clearview AI. The Clearview AI database is made up of billions of images scraped from millions of sites, including Facebook, YouTube, and Venmo. A lot of these big tech companies like Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn have all sent cease and desist letters to the company, and Facebook sent a demand that the company stop accessing or using information from Facebook or Instagram. So you know that if these companies that are selling all of our data to everyone are sending cease and desist letters, that it's over the top. I couldn't find any type of legal ramifications for the way that they're collecting the data either. Since there's no guidelines, there's no legal ramifications. I just really don't think the way that these databases are being built seems very ethical. These services like the DMV, Clearview, or any other third-party facial recognition service that are stacking databases are doing so by collecting information on people that have never been accused of any crimes and are now in a database to be considered suspects. This is all being done without user consent or knowledge, and I believe that is a clear violation of our privacy rights and due process. There are also Fourth Amendment right issues, as the Fourth Amendment protects individuals from unreasonable searches and seizures. The United States Supreme Court establishes protections in Katz versus the United States, in which protect legitimate or reasonable expectations of privacy where a person has exhibited an actual expectation of privacy. So then begs the question, do these privacy protections apply in a public space? Do we have a reasonable expectation of privacy in public? And I would argue yes, that as a law-abiding free citizen, I should have a reasonable expectation of privacy in all areas of my life. And we've seen in the past how we've enacted other mass surveillance practices like the NSA under the guise of protection, or Hoover with the FBI. And we've seen in the past how negatively it's impacted society. And I really think that we should be closing these doors instead of expanding to avoid living in any type of Orwellian-style Big Brother culture. So facial recognition data is easy for law enforcement to collect and hard for individuals of the public to avoid. and we are seeing increased information sharing among agencies. So these databases are getting huge. And there's FBI data showing that the larger the databases get, the less accurate the systems become, since so many people look similar enough. And I mean, I'm sure there's there's a point. So at one point, it's less accurate when there's not enough data, and then when it gets excessive, it's less accurate as well. So there's a sweet spot, and I think we've surpassed it already. Recent studies by the National Institute of Standards and Technology have uncovered additional limitations in the accuracy of this technology. They found that false positives for Black, Asian, and Native American faces had dramatically higher rates. So in an already biased justice system, I think it's imperative that this law is corrected before facial recognition technology is acknowledged as an accurate source of evidence. Unfortunately, this does not seem to be the case currently. There have already been several people wrongly arrested due to the inaccuracy of this technology. Niger Parks, for example, was accused of shoplifting at the Hampton Inn and then attempting to hit a police car. He was arrested with a positive facial recognition match as evidence. New Jersey uses a no bail system, which instead uses an algorithm to evaluate the defendant's risk rather than money to determine whether a defendant can be released for trial. I thought that was super interesting that they used an algorithm. I'd never heard of that. But because of this, he ended up having to spend 10 days in jail, which would have got me fired, and had to pay $5,000 to defend himself. And a lot of people don't have $5,000 to defend themselves, or for anything, really. And this case was eventually dismissed for lack of evidence, and he ended up suing the police department for a violation of his civil rights, false imprisonment, and false arrest. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to find a verdict on if he won against the state or not. It's possible it hasn't concluded yet. It was pretty recent. It happened just at the end of last year. But either way, he was really lucky to get off since he was up against a 10-year sentence. And it's not implausible to think that there have already been some people that fell through the cracks, and that people have already been arrested under the false pretense from this faulty technology. And then when mistakes do happen, there is currently no accountability. So Clearview AI is quoted as saying that it isn't the company's responsibility to make sure its technology is being used properly, even though it's being deployed to thousands of police agencies. And then you already know the police are saying they cannot be blamed since the information came from a third party and not from their office. The biggest argument in favor of facial recognition technology being given to law enforcement is the possibility of solving big crimes. And I am totally in favor of helping the police. I would love to see some of these cold cases get solved. However, that is just not what it's being used for. The majority of the time, it's being used for low-level petty offenses like shoplifting and small stuff. And then to top that off, there seems to be very little oversight and no clear guidelines as to how this technology is being used in court. Law enforcement has stated that facial recognition should not be relied on to put anyone in jail, and that a computer match should not be the basis of arrest. However, there are court records suggesting that that's not necessarily being enforced, since there do exist records in which the only evidence is the facial recognition match. So in conclusion, I think this technology was created on the backs of the public without any real consent, and then handing it over to law enforcement is a violation of our privacy, due process, and Fourth Amendment rights. When the biometrics are turned over to law enforcement and the FBI to enhance their systems, they are able to build this mass surveillance infrastructure without any clear authorization from Congress, safeguards, or public input. This technology is giving government agencies the power to track who we are, where we go, and who we know. And it's really just too big brother for me. I believe that the bad outweighs the positive, and that we should either establish guidelines as a country to determine what is acceptable use and where the photos for the databases can come from. And then I definitely believe law enforcement should not be using third-party services that have little to no accountability when something goes wrong. And I also have an issue with the accuracy. Facial recognition technology is fine for social media, but I don't believe it should be used to make criminal justice decisions since it is not completely accurate and has a track record of bias. So this pretty much wraps up my presentation. Sorry, I stumbled there at the end. Let me know what your thoughts are. I linked some of the cases and below. And what else? I guess that's it.